Hello and welcome to this review of Season 2 of the My Hero Academia Vigilantes anime. We kick off this review, as we always do with these reviews, by talking about the positives and the headline positives, the big things I'll be discussing over the course of this video. I enjoyed the humour and tone of this season overall. I like the more slice-of-life, grounded storylines that we had here, and the Eraserhead storyline was just brilliant. I know that some of these points of praise might seem a little bit vague before transitioning to something very specific, but hey, that shows the strength of that storyline, and let's be honest, if you're watching and listening to this review, you will have seen the past season, so you don't need me to give you some kind of annotated retelling of the highlights and lowlights of this season. I look at these season-long reviews on a more wider scale, on a more bird's-eye view of it, talking about the various different elements in a wider scale of it. With that said, let's get into the first point of praise, it's that I did really love the humour and tone of this season. Now, some people might get upset with me when I say this, but I've always found Vigilantes to be a rather goofy and silly series. Despite all the declarations about this series being darker than the main one, and whilst it is certainly true with some plot elements, by and large this is a series that can be very odd and very goofy and just weird and silly, and I do love that. I mean, hell, if I'm being honest, I find Vigilantes to be a lighter, brighter, and more laid-back experience than the main one. Some of that is due to the fact that the stakes in various aspects of this series are lower, and of course an element of this is because the humour and tone of it is the way that it is. Yes, me praising the humour and the tone of this series might feel odd, particularly bearing in mind that this particular season has the Eraserhead storyline, but I mean this more generally. This is a season which, whilst it isn't quite as goofy and silly as the previous season, I am glad that it didn't lose those weirder charms. This is a season that has Crawler and, to a lesser extent, Popstep fighting a bunch of Mecha Godzilla-themed delinquents. There is a villain with a head shaped like a children's train character. We have the sequence where All Might is fighting a bunch of lunch monsters. We have the big lads that got turned into monsters starting their own cat cafe. There are other jokes in these, bigger ones, smaller ones, but they all keep within the same neighbourhood of being rather likeable goofiness, which helps give this series more of its own identity and helps it stand apart from the main one. Yes, the main one could be goofy and silly, but here it feels like those moments are more part of the DNA and construction of this series, more so than the main one. And yes, of course, there are these moments of good, serious drama, which I'll talk about in a few moments' time. But the humour and tone here, whilst it isn't a make or break element, it is still one, like I say, that helps this series develop its own identity. And a lot of these feel like jokes that couldn't be done in the main series, either because they're just so weird and eccentric that they couldn't fit in with the tone of the main series, or because how many of these jokes do centre around the strength and the personalities of our characters. There are many jokes here that revolve around just how much of an almost endearingly oblivious and feckless individual that Crawler is, and it's that element of him that helps to make him feel like more of an everyman regarding how he fits into this world. I mean, yes, in this season he does get some, I will admit, unneeded power unlocks, but beyond this, this is still a guy with a kind of crappy quirk that's just trying his best to overcome the odds in the situations like that he's in, and those kind of jokes that we have where he doesn't quite get the fact that Popstep is into him, and he doesn't quite get the fact that there's the bit in the Mix episode where the girls are flirting with him, is stuff that wouldn't really work with characters in the main series because they feel that they're meant to be more focused, they're meant to be more competent in a way that Crawler isn't, and that helps to make him stand out more. We do get something similar with Popstep, to be fair, but I do feel that the attempts of her trying to be a pop star or an idol aren't really followed to the extent that they really should be, though more on that later. But we do get some elements of her trying to balance her stage persona with her real life one, and I do think that the stuff that we get with her in the convention centre was neat. I still think it could have been better, but still, we do have an attempt here with these characters to make them more endearing, and those jokes help to make them endearing. We're meant to laugh with them, not really at them, though there are some jokes or other jokes are at their expense, and these jokes, like I say, are built well into the season and into the very DNA of this series to make it feel alive in a way the main series isn't. That's not a knock against the main series, but here this is very much a world where the quirks can be weird and strange and creepy and odd and goofy and silly and almost esoteric. This is a series where characters can look like characters from movies and pop stars, and this is a series where those weird moments can happen, yet they are still able to then pivot into more dramatic stuff. Like, this is a series where Crawler can get chased by the big bad wolf trying to save Little Red Riding Hood, and then that episode can pivot into the Razorhead's origin stuff without it feeling as though that goofy stuff at the start of it undermines what comes there after, or that the stuff that comes there after undermines the stuff that came before it. A great balance has been done here to be able to bring these sillier and more serious moments together. And whilst the action and drama is well animated, I'm going to talk about one element of that later on, I still do love the slice of life stuff that we get in this season. I like the more grounded moments that we get here. The event planning, the idol convention, the mixer stuff. Whilst these are not big, epic superhero fantasy elements, and whilst they do still lead into superhero action things, the events themselves are very grounded. They have a great sense of place, which is helped by the fact that these often take place in very real locations, and if that specific location isn't real, it still feels as though an attempt has been made to make them feel real. They aren't overly out of the ordinary. Like, you could imagine in the main series, if a character went off to do this convention thing like Popstep is doing in this one, and that convention centre would be this massive multimedia epic extravaganza, whereas here it looks like it's just fixated in a small corner of just a larger building, and that no one's really here for the entertainment, everyone's just here to network. And whilst this is still a world of superheroes and superpowers, again, these moments take place in locations which are believable and grounded. Again, this is not some kind of big super-powered convention centre with all the high-tech gadgets and gizmos. The mixer stuff just happens in a bar, the kind of place that I imagine is typical for most bars in Japan, and the event planning stuff happens just in offices. Normal offices as part of a larger office complex. When they're training for their events, they're just doing it at a local track and field high school area. Whilst I'm not at a point where I can say that I feel that Narahata is almost a character in itself, the fact is distinctly set in Narahata, and the fact that all the locations feel real and feel like they are actual places where someone on the production team, the creators of this series, or someone just went, you know, I just went out in my lunch break, and I know we've got that scene where Crawler and Popstep are going to be in that bar. Well, I saw a bar up the road that looked would be great for it. I've taken a few pictures, we'll use that, and that helps to make this feel grounded, so that when you have those goofy or weird moments, it feels like it's taking place in a real world, in a real place, and that, again, these events, many of the events that involve our main characters, whilst they do go on to have these big superhero set-piece moments, especially the stuff in the Sky Egg, the events themselves that lead up to it are small scale. Like I say, when Popstep does the convention stuff, it's just a convention for local supermarkets in the region. She isn't invited to some kind of big, mega international pop idol event where she's doing some big singing thing in front of a facsimile of Simon Cowell or whoever. It's just done in a convention centre. Like, I've recently rewatched 2 Heroes for the main series, and I was watching that thinking, whilst as neat as this place is, as neat as Island is, had Popstep been in a series that was more like the main one, the convention centre she would be in would look like something off of Island. And that isn't the case. She's just doing it in some convention centre. And yeah, this might be a great boost to her career, or just helps her to get to the next stage of it, or hell, if we're being harsh, this might be as good as it gets for her as a pop singer, but it's still believable. It still has that very grounded element of it, because it is just the kind of thing that so many performers, so many of us who are connected to the performing arts have dealt with. That we're not going off to the big show in the middle of the city, we're doing it in the local village hall, or we're doing it in the student theatre space. We're not going to the big events because we're not that person. Maybe not yet, maybe not ever. And for Popstep, that's the same thing. This event that she's going to is not in and of itself a world-altering event, but for her, as small scale as it is, this might be the event that changes her life. She doesn't know it, we don't know it as people watching it, and maybe it could have been, had the supervillain nonsense not come into play for a bit. But having an event that small scale helps to make these characters feel real, even if they have weird hairstyles and weird superpowers, and it helps us to endear ourselves to these characters more. Like I say, if this been in another series, Popstep will be going to a big mega event, a big national, if not international thing. Here she's at some stuffy little convention centre where the people there seem more interested in networking and doing deals and figuring out the best trade routes within the local area, more so than actually seeing and paying attention to the performers. Like, remember, that little stage that they're on is a little stage. It looks like it's no bigger than a king-size mattress, but hey, they're gonna do their best. Yes, they have the bigger stage, but that bigger stage is just there for product launches. She isn't even a main factor in this thing, and that's great. As far as a world-building thing, that's great as far as making these characters feel real, because these are the kind of small little events that people who want to get involved in the performing arts, be that as a singer or an actor or a comedian, will have to do. And I like that about it. And the fact that our characters are not the best of what they can do. Popstep, in the context of this series, in the context of this story, is a kind of above average singer, slightly maybe below average, but she does her best. Crawler is a guy that has a kind of crappy quirk, but he tries his best. Knuckleduster is a guy that used to have a quirk and just has to try his best. And these are all elements that help to elevate them. And it all takes place in a world and in a series of events that feel grounded. This is not connected to some big megacorp or some international scheme or whatever. Whilst the big scheme by the villains is, as far as a lot of these elements are concerned, they're not. And the writers are able to find ways in taking these small-scale events and connect them to bigger things, which makes them feel more real. Like, think about your crime stories where it turns out that the local donut shop was a front for some money laundering thing. Here it's a similar kind of aspect, that this little event that Popstep's gone to is, knowingly or not, part of a major drug network. And aspects of that make the criminal element feel more lived in and grounded. This grounded element is something that really does help sell this series. My final big point of praise is the Eraserhead storyline. It is just brilliant. Now, as I said towards the start of this review, I'm not going to give you a big rundown on my feelings on it. I might well do a dedicated review just to it on its own. Maybe even asking the question, is it just worth watching independently of the rest of this season? And if you want a more focused idea as to what I think about it, go back and re-listen to my reviews of those episodes. Hell, I think if you want a more sincere feeling of it, maybe go back and listen to my feelings on the manga review, because that was a more visceral and first time thing. I will grant you I've not finished doing the reviews of those episodes in the mangas yet. That's going to start off next week, or possibly the end of this week, depending on how things pan out as far as other things I'm involved in. But this is a storyline that I just think has so much going for it that it's almost dizzying. Like, this is one that's able to balance all the things I love about this specific series and the main one, as well as add layers of dramatic and thematic depth that the whole entire franchise lacks. There is a level of thematic subtext with that bloody stray cat that is not reflective in the rest of the series, and it's what makes this work so much. It's something that makes the Eraserhead's personality and the way he does things make total bloody sense, not just in the context of the time period of this flashback, but in the present day of Vigilantes and the present day of the main series. It totally contextualizes so much about him. can't not find it brilliant. It explains why he is a loner and why he acts the way that he does. And that whole subversion of him thinking that he's getting a message from LoudCloud, only to reveal that it was all in his head, is just this brilliantly miserable but fantastic gut punch. And yet, this is a storyline that still has a legally distinct version of Prince mixed with a JoJo character and a chain-smoking Majin Buu knockoff as characters. And those guys don't feel like they're derailing or upsetting anything in this storyline. They're integrated in such a way they are just part of this world. You're not feeling distracted by the fact it's a chain-smoking Majin Buu or it's a legally distinct Prince/JoJo character. They're integrated in a way which works. All this is balanced so brilliantly well. It establishes a younger version of Eraserhead and Present Mike in a way that makes sense for them. Like, you'd think that just from what you know from the main series that Present Mike, Eraserhead, LoudCloud, they'd be the big three of their time at UA. And they're not. They all had their issues and their foibles and their weaknesses that held them back. Like, Eraserhead wasn't a good student. He wasn't good in close combat. He was kind of average as far as his grades were concerned. And yet he managed to find a way to succeed in his career despite the trauma and pain that he had. Now, I wish that it was better integrated as far as the season as a whole was concerned, because I will be brutally honest, this storyline just feels like it's kind of there, in a way that it doesn't feel like it needs to be there at all. Yes, I am happy that we got it, I'm happy that it was still able to be grounded, yet emotional, yet give us a darker look into this world, but not in a way that felt gratuitous, in a way that felt like it is totally in keeping with everything else, but at the same time, it just feels like it could have been done in a different season, or its own spin-off, for what it's worth. But seeing as we are pivoting to a negative point of view and a tone of voice, let us get into the negatives. And the headline negatives are that this season had a weak soundtrack, it lacks the creative flair of the prior season, and the fatal flaw for me is our lead characters feel far too absent from the main story. The soundtrack is a simple thing, I just think it's weak. Whilst I know that the intro and outro have their fans, and I will admit that I've come around to them a lot, especially the intro, I think that musically speaking, soundtrack-wise, it's weak. It's really weak and indistinct and generic, and at points for me it feels like it undermines moments of drama, not to the extent that Murray Gold's soundtracks in the most recent season of Doctor Who do, but with that said, I don't think it really adds much of the scenes that in either. It just feels like wallpaper, audio wallpaper. It doesn't really elevate the visuals, the mood, or the tone, or the feel. It just feels stock, generic, like something from a library. I'm thinking back to the moment when Mikato is leaving with Captain Celebrity to going to America, and it's the same generic, bland, emotional music that's used repeatedly in this season, in the prior one too. There's nothing about it which feels as though it's distinct to the mood or tone of that moment. Specific other series will have these very specific music cues, very specific moments, very specific soundtracks, and whilst I don't think that we needed something to the extent of certain other soundtracks where it's like every couple of minutes is a new soundtrack, a new piece of music, here I still think we needed something that had a greater sense of its own identity. Because when you have moments like the bit with Mikato at the airport, having such a rather weak song, it just feels like the little light in the studio audience that tells the studio audience to start clapping, to start giving their applause. Like, it doesn't do anything apart from just make it feel like this is the moment it's supposed to be sad, but we get that given the context of the visuals and the story. So what have we got? It doesn't really feel like much. And I will admit that itself is a matter of personal taste, but hey, if we're going to something that is especially a matter of personal taste, I will be blunt, I don't think this year's season had anywhere near the same level of creative flair as the first one did. The first season was a largely faithful adaptation of the first 4 and a bit volumes. Give or take some details, some stuff was slightly rearranged, some chapters were not adapted at all, but it was a largely faithful adaptation, and that itself is fine. And look, I know that when it comes to anime adapting manga, they tend to do things very, very faithfully. But with that said, an element that I did appreciate as someone who read the manga is that there were this series of rather neat creative decisions which helped to elevate that material. Stuff that never needed to happen, but they did anyway. Stuff that I, as someone who has read the manga, appreciate because it adds a sense of just creative finesse that just couldn't, for one reason or another, be done in the original source material. We have stuff like, and again, not all of it is major, a lot of it is minor stuff, but it's stuff like Captain Celebrity, when he's talking to his wife on the phone, he speaks in English, which, yes, is a feature you're only really going to notice in the Japanese version of it, but it's there. The bit where they're introducing Captain Celebrity for the first time, it has this almost Michael Bay, Linkin Park soundtrack in the background, making it feel as though he's distinctly a character from America, that he's playing into American superhero culture. The history of quote licenses using an American comic book artist or artists to make that art is great. Particularly bearing in mind that this whole licensing thing comes from America. The retro-inspired TV advert for the supermarket jingle was cute, very believable, worked very well. We have the younger version of Izuku's mum's design in the first episode rather than using the more recent version, which is a sweet element. And bringing number 6 into the story early, even if he's just still largely a background character, is a cool addition. These are changes in creative choices that did not need to happen, but the fact that they happened is something that adds flavour to it. Oh sure, had they never been done at all, it wouldn't have undermined the piece. But at the very least, it adds that extra sense of flair, that extra sense of flavour, which I liked as someone who read the manga. And anyone who isn't familiar with the manga probably still got a kick out of it as well. This season doesn't have anything resembling that level of creativity. Everything that happens here is more or less one-to-one with the manga, give or take a few shots or maybe a few episodes here and there. Oh sure, they added in the Mechagodzilla gang and the poster of the hero that got killed when the League of Villains removed Overhaul's hands is a neat addition, and young Izuku Midoriya and his mum outside the Captain Celebrity farewell show is neat again, but that's about it as far as the creative twists and turns for this season went. There's nothing quite on a par with the stuff that we got in the first season. Now, some of that might be because there's less room to do that creative flair here, but I don't know why there isn't this level of creative flair either. Now, I'm not going to go down a what I would have done path, as that's not really an area that I'm comfortable with these reviews, but two things quickly off the top of my head could have been that, well, speaking of the stuff that happened at the Sky Egg, you could have, well, in the behind-the-scenes material for the manga, they mention a couple heroes that they wanted to include in the Sky Egg stuff, but they didn't have time to draw them in. They had some sketches of them, but they never had a chance to do it. Whereas if they did in the anime, they could have included them. You know, they had the sketches, they had the material there, they could have put them in. Something else they could have done a little bit more with the convention. You didn't need to see anyone perform, but you could have at least given a hint of people performing. You could have given a hint of Popstep doing something, or that she's practicing the song that she's going to sing. Just at least give a hint of there being something there with that, but that isn't. And including stuff like this doesn't mean you're having to radically rewrite anything. Just because you include an extra couple heroes that you didn't have time to include in the manga, or because you're maybe featuring the final, 10 seconds of a song that Popstep is singing. It wouldn't be crazy to have to reanimate or change anything, but it's just little things like that which would have made it feel different, that would have given it an extra sense of spark. Because, I mean, for goodness sake, if you're willing to redraw the delinquents and turn them into Mechagodzillas and then have an additional scene where they creep on Popstep, you can add those extra couple heroes in the Sky Egg stuff. I mean, yes, I would have liked more original new characters to be used in that sequence, in that whole stuff with the Sky Egg, have heroes from this very specific point in history, or maybe include some earlier costume designs of those pre-existing characters. That had at least been something, but here we don't get that. And this absence of creative flair isn't a make or break thing per se, but the prior season set this bar pretty high for me. That whilst the core events were still going to be faithful, there would still be these little twists and bits of flavour added in to add this extra sense of identity to it, which we frankly don't get here. Oh sure, had those moments of creativity not been in that first season, I wouldn't be complaining about it now. At least not necessarily, but all the same, we had a first season which was able to do and was willing to do some different, new and I wouldn't say bold things, but at least interesting things, but this season doesn't. Maybe it's because the team behind this had less time to figure out what they were doing, so just stuck to adapting it straight. Maybe they were told to be more faithful, I don't know, but I think that this absence of this creative flair takes some flavour away from this season, flavour that I think was needed. Because at the very least, it would probably do something to mitigate the big fatal flaw with this season, which, well, again, when it comes to anime adaptations of manga, they are very, very faithful to their source material, for better or for worse. But I have to say is that on a scale of better or worse, look, I don't want to say as though this was a bad adaptation. I don't want to say that. And I don't want to make it out that I don't like Vigilantes as a series, but there is one fatal flaw with this season. It's the same one that I had with the manga, which is the fact that during this time period, our cast feel sidelined. This was an issue that I had at this approximate time in the manga as well, and here it is, with nothing to really mitigate that. Oh sure, adding a couple extra characters, a couple extra background heroes wouldn't undermine that, wouldn't take that problem away, but at least it would have distracted me briefly to not feel as though this is as much of a problem. Because it really does bend my head that just how unproactive Crawler is as a protagonist. I've never known of a protagonist less proactive in their story than Crawler in any piece of culture or media that I've seen in my entire life. Oh, okay, sure, maybe there's something in the deeper recesses of my memories from my time studying modernist and postmodernist theatre, but as far as mainstream superhero series go, I just don't get it. Like, I'd understand if this was something that was more thematic or subtextual, but it's not, and it's really bloody strange. Look, I have no issue with him bungling his way into trouble and needing a saving. It's a fun gag. And whilst it does get a little bit annoying after a certain point, you still, after a certain point, need him to actually interact with the main storyline. He has no hand on the investigation into Trigger whatsoever. He knows nothing about Number 6. He hasn't done anything to really investigate into the existence of instant villains and who's behind them. He only really deals with the threats that are in his immediate vicinity. He deals with the problems as they arise, not trying to stop them. He is still the nice guy. He's still the guy that cleans up the dirt and the detritus of society, but it's still just stuff that's in his immediate area. Oh, it's a monster man on Trigger. I'm gonna stop the monster man. That's about as far as he goes. He doesn't investigate into Trigger and where it comes from and how it's been proliferating around this environment. He just exists, stopping the monster but not stopping the people doing it, not investigating into it any further. His involvement from that is totally minimal. Yes, there is this scene that they add in the manga and in this anime where he's got this thumb drive of information he gives to Midnight, which sure brings him back into it a little bit, but hey, it would have been bloody nice if he'd done that over the course of the season. We had some kind of sense he was building some kind of investigation here rather than doing it as an arsepull to make it seem as though he's still involved in the story. If we had any sense of him doing something here, that'd be tolerable. It feels like an attempt to mitigate the criticism that the character isn't a character. He's just a background character in his own life story. Popstep has it just as bad. The convention arc had the potential of giving a great insight into her personality, her history, why she does what she does, her fears and anxieties she has around performing, how she feels that she's seen by the wider industry, how she's seen by people, her desire to become a recording artist. But this is as best as she can get. The best that she can do is a small, tiny little stage in a corner of the room at a convention centre, and that would have been a great one time to understand her better. It would have been a great chance to build up a relationship with her and Crawler, even if he still doesn't understand anything and doesn't see the romantic aspect there and just sees us as a friend. But that isn't what we get. Instead, what we get is next to nothing. Hell, imagine if Popstep had been the one to uncover the Trigger network instead of the Crab Cop lady or Crawler. Imagine how that would have changed the thrust of this season. They bump into Number 6 and they're really not prepared for what he can do. But that's not what we get. Instead, we get these characters carrying on, just being there, largely in the background in their own story, with the focus being on characters first introduced in the main series. Yes, Knuckle Duster is involved in the investigation, but his involvement in this season as a whole feels very sporadic and periodic. And even then, it's flanked by other stuff that isn't really directly connected to any of this. Popstep and Crawler have the potential to be great characters. Our main three characters of Popstep, Crawler, and Knuckle Duster are great, but they don't get utilised at all. These are three characters that are crap in their own way. They are not the best of the best, but they try to make the best of what they have around them. Popstep and Crawler are the every man and every woman of this series. They are not the best at what they do, but they try. But sadly, as this series and this season itself is concerned, they're just there. They just kind of exist there on the periphery as everyone else has the bigger, better, more interesting storylines. They don't really involve themselves in much of anything. The story happens around them. And I don't like that. We need the characters to be more directly involved with what's going on. And I find it baffling that no real attempt was made to mitigate that going into this season. Yes, it would have meant rewriting and altering some stuff, but even just a slight hint of them discovering something or finding something would have been, well, something. Of course, we also have the issue that this is a series that has kind of transitioned away from being a vigilante show to just being a have-a-go hero moment with them doing some hero stuff where they can now, because it feels as though the series has kind of lost its way as to what it's supposed to be about. And I feel that the people that made this season knew that this was a problem. That's why they moved the Eraserhead arc earlier in the season as an attempt to try and mitigate that, so that when this season ended, there would be more of a focus on Crawler and Popstep. But I don't think that it's really worked. I don't think it has worked really at all, because let's be honest, had they gone with the source as written, the closing end image of this season would have been Eraserhead looking back at Crawler at the end of his arc. Was a great image and a great way to end the season. It would have meant the focus would have been squarely on Eraserhead, a character that's not a main character of this series. They could have ended it with Mirko and Captain Celebrity leaving. Again, a great image, but that would have left us with a cliffhanger that really goes nowhere, because we have the whole bit where the detective effectively says to Mirko to say, hey, tell Crawler to knock this vigilante crap off, otherwise he's getting arrested. And that would have set up for an interesting storyline, which, seemingly given the time skip, goes nowhere. So in the end, they rearranged the series of events to try and mitigate it, to make it feel as though Crawl and Popstep really are the main characters of this. So that's their best effort, just move things around. But you still have the issue that whole tell Crawler to knock it off stuff just doesn't go anywhere. And yes, I am paraphrasing what he actually said, because I don't have time to go back and reread it or rewatch it, but you get the idea. They've just moved around a couple episodes in the hope that this would give it a better ending. And it doesn't, because in my opinion, that ending is very weak. Like, I'd still make the argument that maybe it's ended in this way because it creates the impression that, hey, if we don't get season 3, at least this resembles something more like an ending, but hey, it is what it is. And I'll be honest, I don't think you can just move a few episodes here or there and make this work. I don't think that you can really do that, because the issue is built into the source text. Without changing said text in the adaptation, it feels like trying to get the eggs out of a cake. The Crawler and Popstep are secondary characters in their own life story for the majority of this season, and just moving a couple episodes around doesn't change that. You needed to change aspects of this story to prevent that being the case. I hope that when we get into the next season, we're going to see more of these characters, and they're actually going to be part of this story, and this will just be seen as the awkward middle part. Otherwise, I'll be surprised if this does get to a season 4. I mean, hell, there's already rumours that it's not, but that's a discussion for all of the point. With that said, let's get into the overview, and first of all, I apologise if I got a bit loud and angry there, but by God, there's so much missed opportunities here. But With that said, this is not a bad season. There are good elements of it, but it feels wonky. The main characters feel very underused, and it lacks the creativity that the first season had. There's some fun jokes, some fun moments, and some great action sequences, and I do love the stuff that we get with Eraserhead. But it really does feel like it's an attempt to just rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, or use whatever metaphor that you want. If you're not going to go to the extent of tackling issues with the source material, then you're going to have this rather unsatisfying thing where our main characters just feel like extras in their own life story. And I hope the next season doesn't do that, but we'll soon find out. Well, that's said and done, however, let's get into Comment Corner. It's time for Comment Corner, reading comments from the previous video, that one called Graduation and Career Path. Our comment comes from Big X1, who says, I thought the episode was okay, I feel mixed about the season, it was fun, but I don't think it was the kind of impact season 1 had, it's kind of mid. Thank you for your comment, and it's a shame that I don't know if this is a broader sentiment with this season as a whole. Of course, by all means, people leave comments in the comment section down below. I will get back to them. Whether or not it'll be in a future video or not, I don't know, as I try to keep comments relative to the series. If there's a sufficient number of comments on this, I might do a video just discussing like people's thoughts more generally on it, but yeah, I from what little I have seen, there's plenty of people that do like it, but there's some people that have just kind of shrugged their shoulders at this season. Maybe it's a timing thing, maybe it's because they've got other things on their plate right now. They're more interested in stuff like Jujutsu Kaisen and, well, just about any other series at the moment, so I really don't know. But still, with that said, let me know what you thought about this season down in the comment section down below. I should be getting back onto doing the manga reviews by Saturday, though I don't know, my schedule's a bit weird at the moment. I'm in the middle of an esports tournament, so when those matches are going to be, I don't know, but I'll try to get it done then. If not, it'll be the next Saturday. We're shifting back to the Saturday schedule because, well, that's generally when I release videos. But in any case, let me know what you thought. Let me know how you're feeling. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe. Do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. And see you next time. Goodbye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on. It'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends. Goodbye.